So we're talking about romantic relationships today, and how it's connected to John and Paul, and basically how did they uh, manage their relationships, and what parallels can we see between them, and how can we maybe learn some lessons from it. So um, song titles, what do you, they got a lot of love songs. What do you got in mind?
I mean, there's so many. The first one that comes to mind is probably a bad one because it's not their composition, which is Love You Too. But I think
Well, we could, I mean, the ultimate, there would be something, right? I mean, that's a
yeah,
great love
yep.
song.
Yeah, it is, and you're probably right. But since this isn't a George show, I think our
Right.
charge is to come up with John and Paul. I mean, like, you can go as naively innocent as She Loves You, although
Yeah.
that's a little gender specific for these
Yeah.
days. So I don't know. I think to me, the I'm going to say the best answer we're going to get is not a song title, but a song lyric, which is in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make, which I've never completely understood that line, but it seems to me to be the highest sort of form of love as an expression. But yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of love songs.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great lyric. You're right. And I believe in one of his post Beatle interviews, John singled that out as something he thought was very good. What about Here, There, and Everywhere? I think that's a very strong song, and apparently Paul's now saying that's his favorite of anything he's ever written.
Yeah, this is funny because my son is a big Beatles fan, and we have this debate all the time how I think Here, There, and Everywhere is the worst song on Revolver, even though being the worst song on Revolver is like living, sort of getting a bad seat at the Super Bowl or whatever. In other words, it's a great song. It just, there's so many better songs on the album. I don't um I don't love it's funny because when we talk about romantic love, and a couple of other songs come to mind from John and Paul, and I'm sure there'll be millions between My Love off Red Rose Speedway or Love, which I think is on Plastic Ono Band. And to me, if I don't like picking solo songs when we have the option to pick a Beatles song because it's both guys. But if I probably had to pick the song with the title that I would choose, so I would choose that lyric from the end, but I think I would choose Love by Lennon, because my problem with Here, There, and Everywhere, and maybe it's the cynic in me, is I just find it to be unrealistically utopian. And but on the other hand, if you want to break down a song like Love, I'm not sure really at its core, even though it certainly could be, love is about romantic love. It seems to me just more generally about love. But I think the difference is Here, There, and Everywhere to me sounds like a song written by a young person with a lot of optimism and naivete, whereas Love is a little bit more, I'm older, I'm wiser. And even though it's ironically, 3 years late, like we talk about that song, like John Lennon was 60 years old when he wrote it. But I don't know. I just, to me, it's like not the right song either, but like the Ballad of John and Yoko to me, like it's just Here, There, and Everywhere to me is, I'm going to use a word that I don't think is a good word, but it sounds just too naive for me to be like, yeah, I'm good with that one.
That's fine. Yeah, well, count me in on that debate. With I'm on your son's side for sure on that.
Of course, that's not surprising.
That's a just knockout song, and another one I'll just throw in just to round it out. I think I Will is a tremendous love song, but again, it's very, love you forever and ever and all of that. But it's
But you know what? I think I Will doesn't sort of have the same naivete to me that Here, There, and Everywhere has. And I don't know why I say that. I think it's, believe it or not, I think it's a better song. I think there's something about Here, There, and Everywhere. I mean, it's a beautiful song. I mean, the harmonies are beautiful. It's the sound. I mean, it's beautiful. And it's funny because I'm going to listen to Revolver, the reissued Revolver,
Yeah.
in the headphones either today or tomorrow. Just really spend some time with it. And obviously I'm going to listen to Here, There, and Everywhere. I just think I don't know, with Paul sometimes, you know, he can be a little sappy, although I don't think it's fair to call Here, There, and Everywhere sappy, because it's just such a brilliant song.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, the good news about this segment is we have a million choices. I think,
Yeah.
you know, as you know, I do a music show where I come up with a theme, and Love is always one where I'm like, you can't do that, because like there's too many songs. It's just not. It's like just saying
Well,
whatever.
I think you're right that the line from the end is, you know, really says it all. What don't you fully understand about that, or what's your, you know, not, uncertainty about what it means?
So the love you take is equal to the love you make. So what is really in your mind the definition of the love you take? What is a real world example of taking love? I know what giving love is. I know what receiving love is, but what is taking love? To me sounds wrong, even though he doesn't mean it that way. It sounds wrong. Receiving love is okay, but taking love sounds a little selfish.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's all what the listener reads into it, and every interpretation is valid, you know. So I just think he meant it's the love you receive. I mean, it's just a way, it's a poetic way of saying the love you take in is equal to the love you create, or as he says, make. And so I think it's as simple as that,
I you
and
know,
as profound as that.
yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying. It's just that I don't want to in any way give shade to that lyric, because I think it's one of the best lyrics ever written, and it comes at the end of one of the best pieces of recorded music ever written, and it serves as the justifiable coda to the end of the band, other than the Her Majesty postscript. But I think it's so anti-McCartney in a weird way, because usually, not that he wouldn't say it this way because there's not the poetry, but the love you receive is equal to the love that you give is the more literal interpretation of that, but the less poetic interpretation of that. So I've always sort of looked at that lyric as, I know what he means, but I don't think that's exactly what he's saying, but I'm not going to quibble with it because it's poetry and it's beautiful and whatever. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, I just view the word take as a little bit of a self-serving word. But I'm completely, you know, if the judges were closing the balloting for this episode, you know, we would have to sort of break our own rule, which is, you know, we're supposed to title each episode with a song title. And if in this one it's a lyric, and if all of a sudden we're opening it up to lyrics, it's a different concept for us, which is not wrong. We could go back and do lyrics to any of it. So I guess if I'm being really anal about our structure, we've got to dismiss that, because the song is called The End. And then we're back into, well, what is the title? Is it Here, There, and Everywhere? My argument would be it's Love, which is the Lennon song. And also Love Now could be misconstrued because people think it's the Cirque du Soleil show in Las Vegas.
Is the title just Love, or is it Oh My Love? I forget.
Well, I think there's two different songs. I think there's Love is Real, Real is Love. That song I think is called Love.
Okay.
And then there's Oh My Love, for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
My eyes are wide open. Those are two different
Yeah.
songs, if
I
I'm
love
not.
that one too. That's a
Oh,
great.
that's a great song. And Jackson Browne does an amazing cover of that song, by the
Sure,
way.
sure.
Yeah, they're both beautiful. I think Oh My Love, though, and maybe this is my point, or maybe this is why Oh My Love is better. We're not talking about like universal love. We're talking about romantic relationships.
Mhm.
And I think that Lennon is an interesting lyricist in that, and I'm going to pick on your guy again, Paul. Paul always used love as well. It's universal. Everybody falls in love. Whereas Lennon, I think, needed to get to where he was with Yoko to really feel love beyond a songwriting device. I mean, the early pre-Rubber Soul songs were love, love me do, please, please me. They were all just love as a songwriting device. I don't think McCartney ever really wrote deeply, not ever really, sorry. I think there were like I Will to Me and My Love to Me strike me as literally specific love, emotive lyrics. Whereas Here, There, and Everywhere, I think was more like, whoa, love is so I guess what I'm saying is it really feels like to me that the Lennon love songs were earned love songs that he didn't have it in his life before that. So I find the songs that he wrote to Yoko to be incredibly, or about Yoko to be
Yeah.
incredibly romantic. But I do think, the Ram record, we've talked about Backseat of My Car or whatever, or even, The Lovely Linda,
Yeah.
or
But I put Maybe I'm Amazed or My Love up against any love song of John's. They're just as powerful and deep and sincere.
I would agree with you and disagree with you. And here's what I mean by that. If I didn't have, and I'm not alone with this, the perception of McCartney as a bit of a showman, then I would say just on their face, you're right. I couldn't argue with you that Maybe I'm Amazed in My Love, or romantically. I mean, Maybe I'm Amazed is a tremendous, tremendous song. And yeah, I agree. I just feel like Lennon comes from a more sincere place, but that's really not fair because, for example, on the song Maybe I'm Amazed, for all I know, he was writing that song for Linda, and that is exactly how he felt. And he obviously was tremendously in love with Linda, and they had a wonderful thing. So yeah, I mean, in a way, Cook of the House, I think, is a romantic song. So
Well, okay.
well,
That's
I guess why I
that's
love
the
Cook.
Seder of Wings right there. As far
Well,
as
the reason I love Cook of the House, I love the Linda McCartney, Paul McCartney Wings, and even though I don't like Speed of Sound nearly as much as any of the albums preceded it, although there's some great, I love Beware My Love and some other songs on that album. You know what? To me, okay. Thank you. This is why I'm glad we do this. You know what I think is the most underrated romantic song Paul McCartney ever wrote, and it's beautiful. And I don't know why more people don't know this song. And I would argue you can pick another song, but you can't not pick this song. I think Warm and Beautiful is just devastatingly beautiful.
yeah, I know.
And
I think that is tremendous song. And just another like little tidbit that I heard. Yoko apparently told Paul that one day they were listening to one of his albums and they cried, or John cried, and I think it was probably because of Warm and Beautiful.
that song makes me cry. Even just talking about it now, it makes me cry. It's just such a wonderful song. I think this is a little bit off the topic, but I think the two most underrated Paul McCartney songs ever are Warm and Beautiful and Daytime, Nighttime Suffering. I think those two songs are just as good as anything he's ever written. And a lot of McCartney fans that are not as deep as you or I don't really know those two tracks. And I just think those are two amazing songs.
I gotta give it to you on that. I think those, I mean, I'd have to think about it if there could be others, but yeah, those are two very strong contenders. And Daytime, Nighttime is like, I would say that's currently my favorite Paul solo song. So
I think
yeah,
Here, There, and Everywhere is a little bit of a victim of the Stairway to Heaven syndrome, which is, I love Stairway to Heaven. I think it's one of the greatest songs ever recorded, but like you can't really talk about it anymore because it's so overplayed
yeah,
that it's
yeah,
almost unfashionable to like it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's kind of ridiculous. And I realize with Here, There, and Everywhere, it's a little bit for me a victim of its just own greatness and its own success.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's you it still can't be denied. So listen, should we talk about some little bit of the biography of the timeline of their love relationships?
Sure.
So I think we can, safely say that as young men, they were running wild, and more power to them, of course. And as Chris Rock says, it's all about the options, and they certainly had lots of options. And I just, from what I can tell, they took advantage of as many as they possibly could. And then John, he gets Cynthia pregnant pretty early on. That doesn't stop him from, running crazy, running wild. But he has this expectation on him of being a husband and being a father, and so he has to go through his guilt about that, and I guess in some sense trying to make it work occasionally. And one thing we should touch on too is, the song "Getting Better," right? And they wrote that together, and there's a line in there where he says, I'm paraphrasing, but I used to beat my woman, or
I used to be cruel to my woman. I kept her apart from the things that she loved. Right? Isn't that the line?
But it also says I specifically beat her.
Yes, it does it.
Yeah, I had it up somewhere. Let me see. Yeah, so let's see.
Is it I used to be cruel to my woman, I beat her and kept her apart from the things
Yeah,
that she loved?
I used to be cruel to my woman. I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. So that's out there. And now apparently Cynthia has since said that he hit her once. Now it's all inexcusable. I was also reading that he physically assaulted a couple of reporters, female reporters, one in 64 and one in 1970. So, as we know, the guy definitely had some anger issues, and he I want to say he didn't do well by Cynthia, really, but what, at the same time, if you're not in love, you're not in love. So ultimately, in terms of breaking that relationship up, I think we all, anyone can understand that if you don't have a passion for it, it's better to get out. So then he obviously gets with his, love of his life, Yoko, and they're hot and heavy and very deep and connected for a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years. Then they have a pretty big blow up, and he's sent off with her assistant, May Pang, and they end up in LA quite a bit of the time. And apparently they were talking about buying a house together and, having a life. And I've heard that he didn't really absolutely break that off until like 1979. Who knows with a lot of these personal details. He called Yoko mother, right? So that's kind of an interesting way to approach your relationship, and they definitely had a complicated relationship. So before we go on to Paul, what do we want to say about John and how he conducted himself in romantic relationships, and what do we take away from that?
Well, it's interesting because in some ways I think I identify more with John, but as we bring ourselves into this, I can't help but think you were divorced. So I think that unlike you, who have always been somewhat self-aware and somewhat stable, John, starting with the loss of his mom, not having a father figure, raised by his aunt, was looking for fulfillment and love. And I think it started with rock and roll and Paul in a weird way. And there were rumors that John may have been interested in both genders, and that's whatever. And then I think Cynthia was, oh, you're supposed to get married. And, and I think I love her, but John didn't really know what I think love was, or love to John at that time evolved. And I think that he sort of realized when he met Yoko that this was a void that he needed in his life, and it was all consuming. And it was like almost for John, probably what LSD was for John before that, which is, oh my God, I never looked at the world this way. And I think John was an all or nothing type guy with drugs, with music and whatever. And then what probably happened with Yoko is he probably got scared, that he was like, this is, mommy, and I'm not sure that I'm okay with that. And then, of course, before he was tragically killed, he was sort of celebrating domesticity and marital bliss and being a father. So it's almost like John needed to get to a point that Paul probably never thought he needed to get to, because Paul was a lot more, I'm good. I think about this with my wife a lot. My wife is very different from me in that she's always sort of like, are we just okay? Can we just be good? Can we just be good? And I'm always like, no, there's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And I think with John, that's sort of what he was searching for. So what I think is interesting, though, about the Beatles and specifically John and Paul, but you could also ask George and Ringo about this, is that in a world where you can have any woman you pretty much want, and let's be honest, they pretty much could have, because they had money, they had fame, they were attractive guys, and they were intelligent guys. The need for both of them to have one woman, just one woman. You look at Mick Jagger, he's had a series of girlfriends his whole life. I mean, he was married, but the need to sort of, I mean, Paul, I know we're not at Paul yet, and I'm sure you're going to go through his timeline, but the need to be sort of with one person. And I think what you were sort of saying was these guys got it out of their system at an early age. And then they were just like, I want a partner. I want a romantic partner. And it's a little bit of a situation. And I think you can speak to this better than I can if you want to, because you were married before and now you're with somebody else. Like, at what point do you sort of say this, I thought this was the right person, but it's not, but I still, I think I would like to find somebody else.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, who are we or anybody really? We're not here to judge, these guys. But we're just looking at it from our perspective. And I, like I say, I give John a lot of credit for having that courage to get out of that relationship that probably looked to the world as very stable and normal and good or whatever. And I think Cynthia is the epitome of what you were saying of your wife. I think Cynthia would say, look, everything's good, John, we're good. Let's just be home together and make dinner and just sit around and watch the television and stuff. But that wasn't him. That wasn't enough for him.
Yeah, I have to interrupt you because I don't exactly agree with that. I think, and also I want to characterize my wife a little bit differently. First of all, in John's case, he was a rock star and it was too young for him to be getting married. I mean, there was just, there was just too much at his disposal. But I think my sort of point wasn't so much about John and Cynthia. It was a little bit more about John and Paul. Whereas I think that Paul was never one, if you really, even if you go and you look at Get Back, right? John is sort of like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go do something else. That I'm finding this claustrophobic. And Paul's like, no, this works. This is good. Let's keep doing this. And I just think that romantically, Paul, and you'll get to it, I'm sure, with Jane Asher being the first girlfriend we kind of knew about, Paul was a little less introspective. John was incredibly introspective to the point of overthinking and becoming his own worst enemy. I think Paul, in a way, was a little bit more, I don't want to say in denial, but was just more, I think, just generally more accepting. So I meant that dynamic more with John and Paul than I did with John and Cynthia. I think Cynthia was just in a tough spot. I mean, would you want to be married to a rock star at the peak of his fame and career? Like, I mean,
yeah, she wanted him to calm down and relax and, settle in.
I had a friend who was the lawyer for Sting. And I'm like, what's the deal with Trudy Styler and, Sting? And he's like, well, there's an understanding that Sting's a rock star, wink, wink. So, I think that probably was something Cynthia imagined was going on, but she was accepting of it in a certain way. And I think John was like, even the fact that she's accepting, I feel the guilt. I used to be beat her and, kept her apart from the things that she loved. So,
and he had Julian. So, there was that.
Yeah. What is the deal, by the way, with Julian now? Because you only hear about Sean. I know this episode is not about this, so maybe we'll save it for fatherhood.
Oh, we can quickly diverge. He just came out with an album called Jude, kind of playing off of the song. And so, yeah, he's not very prolific, but every blue moon he puts out some new music. I haven't really heard the new album. There's one he did some years ago. I think it's called Photograph Smile. That's actually a very good album, start to finish. I don't know what happened, but he pulled it together and wrote some great songs. But yeah, I guess he's had his own resentments to deal with of how he was treated by John and then subsequently by Yoko. And
well, let's save that one because we have one coming up for fatherhood. You probably want to go through the Paul timeline. Yeah,
you were saying you wanted to make sure you characterize your wife, correctly. Did you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was trying to say was that
I was connecting her to Cynthia, and you wanted to maybe amend that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I did, because what I was saying is the example I was using in terms of things being not okay versus things being okay was really more the way John and Paul were as a dynamic. In other words, I think there's a strength that Paul has and that my wife has that I can't speak to whether Cynthia had, which is, sometimes it's good to just appreciate and be mindful of where you are. And I think Paul has that much more than John ever had. And I think my wife has that much more than I ever had. That was the corollary. Cynthia, I don't know enough about her beyond, I just think she was in a bad spot. I mean, Cynthia, for all I know, might have been like, John, can you take me out on tour and let's go drink and do drugs? And I think John would have been like, I'm not saying she was like that, but if she was, I don't think John would have wanted her to come with him.
Yeah, they just didn't have that burning passion. I think, I'm sure I think I've heard they had something going for a little while, but she just didn't bring to the table what somebody like a Yoko could bring. But again, I also think,
I also think it has to do with the time of their life. I don't think Yoko if Yoko met John when he met Cynthia, I don't think he would have been
Yeah,
attracted to
probably,
Yoko.
probably. But again, remember back in those times, people were getting married very young. It
Yeah.
wasn't that unusual.
And we both got married pretty young, right? How old were you when you got married?
I think I was 26.
That's young.
Yeah. How about you?
I was older than you. I was, let me do the math. I think I was 30.
Mm, mm, yeah.
But John, but your 26 and your 30 and my 26 and my 30 was radically different than John and Paul's
Yeah.
26 and 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, he got married before he ever envisioned that he was going to be arguably one of the most famous figures in the history of civilization, right? He didn't know that at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I think the Yoko thing is different because it's the John Lennon of I've been through drugs, I've been through fame, I've been through Jesus, I've been through, the Beatles, and now it's Yoko. I don't think John meeting Yoko at 22, 23 years old or whenever he met Cynthia would have been the same thing.
Yeah,
And
it's quite possibly. Yeah. And Yoko was more mature at that point too. I mean, she had gone through another relationship also.
exactly.
So all right, so moving to Paul, as you've kind of already alluded to, he came from a more stable family. Okay, so that's always part of his outlook on life, and I think that ultimately led him to really appreciating how do you say domesticity,
Domesticity.
and that whole warmth of family and everything. But yeah, he was running wild like John, and then he hooked up with Jane Asher for quite some time, and apparently they were the it couple of the mid 60s, and I still I think about that every once in a while. Why didn't that work? Cause, and I don't know Jane, obviously. I mean, but even knowing of her, she seems like a very sort of similar to Linda, very grounded person. Yes, she was an actress, but she wasn't sort of a starlet kind of person. But shit happened, and apparently she caught him in the act with somebody else when she was supposed to be out of town, and she's like, yeah, and they were engaged at that point, so she's just like, yeah, I get it. No, we're done with this. And so then he was with this woman, Francie Schwartz. I can't remember if she was British or not, but anyway, they were quite a couple for some time. And then I think he was with Linda and Francie for some time. And I sometimes wonder, as much as it turned into a love affair of the ages, did he get Linda pregnant? Yeah, because I don't know. I think when they were married, I'm sorry, when they had their wedding, that she was pretty advanced in her pregnancy. So, but but obviously he felt a deep connection with her too, and I think he quickly settled into, wow, this is really nice, and I think Linda was a nurturing kind of person, and he needed some nurturing at that time with the breakup of the Beatles, and kind of, as you're saying, the breakup of his real first marriage, which was to John, and Linda helped him heal from that, and for the next 20 years or so, I think by all accounts they had a very good relationship. I'm sure there were ups and downs. He has said they had ups and downs, but you would think if anything happened, like he cheated on her, I mean, God, somebody would have said something. And there's not been a peep of that by anyone ever. So I'm inclined to think, as amazing as it seems, that that he stayed loyal to her all through his time. Would you agree with that?
Well, I have no idea, but I would say that based on Paul McCartney's history, he does seem to be a guy that always wants to have one partner. I'm sure you'll go through the rest of his life, but he clearly wants to stay married. That's been his pattern. But the other thing is, it's interesting because I've never worked with my wife, and I don't think I'd ever want to. And I don't know if you've ever worked with your wife, but both Paul and John brought their wives into their work. And with Linda, you talk about cheating. I mean, how could have you even done it? She was in the band. They were recording together on the road. They were raising little kids together, and they were touring together. So
and he wanted it that way.
And he wanted it that way. So I think, and also she was from that world. She was a rock photographer. Before she met Paul, she was taking photos of the Rolling Stones and whatever. So in a way, I think he created a world, to your point, that he wanted, where there wasn't even opportunities for him to run around and seek out other women, if he was even interested in doing that. Because as you're about to tell us, I think, there wasn't a lot of, he dealt with Linda's death is just, one thing about Paul, he doesn't write about it, which really pisses me off. He writes like, all those years ago or whatever. Well, that was George, but he writes these sort of surfacey things about John, but like,
well, Here Today is not surfacey. Here Today was a deep song.
All right. But this is a man who like lost at everybody close. Paul lost John, Paul lost Linda, Paul lost George. So, but the Linda death, was clearly horrible. But it didn't take long for him to, marry again. And so he just seems like a one-woman guy. And also where John, I think, wants to go out and do crazy things before he sort of decided he was going to, decamp to the Dakota with Sean and Yoko. I think Paul was a sort of, I want to smoke a joint and drink a margarita and not really go out kind of guy. Now he seems a little bit different like that now. But I don't know. I just don't think, maybe he didn't have the libido. Maybe he didn't have, I don't know. Plus there are a lot of kids, man. How many kids does Paul McCartney have?
I think there's 4 total. So Heather comes from Linda's first marriage. Then there's Mary, Stella, and James.
And then also you have the fact that John Eastman,
and Beatrice with Heather, which we'll get to.
Okay. And then you had John Eastman and Lee Eastman still to this day being his lawyers. So when Linda was alive, he was also, the family business was all family. Like there was nothing wasn't that.
Yeah. So just to complete his timeline, as we all know, he mourned Linda, I think, for a solid year or so, and then he got together with Heather Mills, famously, and I don't think it takes a rocket scientist or a psychotherapist to figure out that he was hot and heavy for her sexually, and she was quite a bit younger than him at the time, and he just dove into that, and I guess he's, in a way, he's true to his music in a sense of he lets himself be captured, I guess I would say, and he's a true romantic, and by all accounts, or many accounts, she's a little bit of a difficult personality, certainly edgy, I think we could say, but he really tried to make that work. Now, when when it came to the divorce, whether he was entirely fair, I don't know. I know she said some outrageous things about him, but I'll just minor point, but I was a little disappointed. He kind of did what I think that the typical thing is, like, he just at that point he's sort of pleading like a poor man. It's like, oh, I don't have that much money, and he had the smarter lawyers, and he hid things where he needed to hide them, and anyway, she got the deal that she got. And so he had Beatrice, his daughter from that marriage, and she's maybe her late teens, early 20s now or something. I don't know. And then eventually he ended up with Nancy, is it Scheibel, from New York, and they're very much in love. Apparently, again, she's much younger than him, but they seem to have a very stable life, and she likes to be out of the spotlight, and they're very good for each other, apparently. So I just want to say, kind of, getting towards closing here, like kind of what inspires me. Like I said, in my life, I admire John for his courage of getting out of a marriage that he wasn't passionate about and diving headfirst into someone he was passionate about. And with Paul, again, how much of it is real and how much of it is just public perception, I don't know. But I was touched by his loyalty to Linda, and how they apparently they never had a night apart except his Japan bust. And I kind of use that a little bit as a something to aspire to in my relationships. So that's it. And obviously, it as usual, it comes down to their songs. Really, we're just touched and moved by their songs. But anything you would say that you found yourself in your life thinking about or applying in terms of how they dealt with relationships?
Just that, as somebody like you who was influenced by them at an early age, when I was probably introduced to them, I was probably 14, 15 years old. And they became the person I wanted to be without the talent. Like I wasn't going to be able to have any musical success, but they became role models for me. And whether it was drugs, or whether it was meditation, or whether it was politics, they influenced me. So I think their songs, and probably Paul more than John, and this goes back to Here, There, and Everywhere, when I didn't have a girlfriend, when I was lonely, those songs to me were aspirational. I want to feel the way they feel in She Loves You, or Here, There, and Everywhere. And then even hearing songs like Run for Your Life, which is a very foreboding song. I think that they're sort of, and this is why I like doing this series with you, there's sort of like, how did those songs influence us as younger men? How do those songs still resonate with us now? And how did they live their lives as a reflection of those songs? And I think that's very interesting.
That's a really, it's a really great point that I want to emphasize about the songs being aspirational in terms of relationships, and you think about a song like My Love or Oh Yoko, or, many others we could run down. I mean, they're setting a very high bar of like, wow, this is, it's not just casual or 90% all in. I mean, no, this is it's everything or nothing kind of thing. And I guess one could beat oneself up for not living up to that ideal, or on the positive side, it's just like, that's where I want to get to, and I still have time. I can still get there. If maybe I need to shed some blocks that mental blocks or emotional, whatever, but I can get to that place of My Love, the song My Love. Yeah, great point.
Cool. All right. Look forward to the next one.
So we'll leave it there, folks. and we'll see you next time. We'll explore another aspect of the Tao of John and Paul. All right. Peace
Peace
and
and
love.
love.
Yeah, exactly. All right. See ya.